So here we are in the studio. I've got Corey here, and we've also got James. James here to be a nuisance. He's the studio dog. So welcome to New Zealand, Corey.
Thank you.
Is this your first time here?
Other than just landing on my way to Australia.
Oh.
Yeah. I've been to your Auckland airport a couple times, but that's
not much to see, is it?
No, not compared to what there is to see.
Yeah.
I mean, this is beautiful. Holy cow. It's just incredible.
Oh, well, it's great you're here, and great you're sharing your music with everyone and playing and doing stuff. So let's start with some questions that people had on the old social. So someone asked about your time with Vic Juris.
Oh, man. I mean...
Killer guitar player. For those that don't know, you need to know.
Vic Juris is a name that, and the music, everybody should know about Vic and should be familiar with his stuff. So, I'd been hearing about Vic for years. I lived in St. Louis for a while. Really, when I started my professional career and touring, that's where I was based, was St. Louis. And I'd always been hearing of, Vic Juris, because I never lived in the city. I was never lived in New York, but, everybody kept telling me that, like, this guy's the man, like, he's the guy.
He's heavy, yeah.
And so I went and heard him with Dave Liebman's group that was playing in St. Louis at the Jazz at the Bistro. And I remember I went to the concert with another guitar player that was a friend of mine. On the break, this other guitar player turned to me and said, "What do you think?" And I remember telling him, I said, "I think we're all chumps." That's what I think.
I'm just going to move this mic a little closer. It's sounding a little distant on your voice.
And I was like, man, to be honest, I think that we all, like, at least me, I need a lot of work based on what I just heard. And so I went up and I talked with Vic at the bar, and I introduced myself, and and I happened to be, at that time, I was like the senior editor at Mel Bay Publications.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And so we were, I was doing a lot of stuff, and really my job at Mel Bay was pretty amazing for a lot of reasons, but one of them was that I got to, go find the writers. And so I just told Vic, I said, man, I'm doing this thing with Mel Bay. I would love to pick your brain, sometime about, like, if you had some stuff you'd want to publish. And he was totally into it. And so we started working on some projects, and it turned in a number of publications for Vic. But I, really long story short, I ended up, also being the guy that kind of coordinated all the Mel Bay Records thing. If, some of the guitar aficionados out there might remember, for a brief period of time, we had this very focused label. So I produced a project of Vic's, and then we did, I did a duo project with Vic that we did for a couple years, and we toured.
That's right. Yeah, I've heard you guys doing that. That's great.
Yeah,
you guys sounded so great together.
Oh, I mean, he was just incredible. And then we had the MB3 group with Jimmy Bruno and me and Vic, Danny Gottlieb, and Jay Anderson. I mean, it was like this really, really incredible band.
The great guitars, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, with reverb and delay.
Yeah.
And then and so we just did all these projects together. And I would have to say he's probably one of the most important, like, professional mentors that I had, because when we were on the road together, pretty much every morning after we get done playing, we'd sit down and have breakfast together, and he would just kind of tell me what he thought I needed to work on, and it was really
in a constructive way.
Yeah, it was always really incredible. I mean, the insight that he had, and he it was kind of funny. He was such a calm and it's like just a thoughtful and precise person. Even when he ate, it was like very, like, kind of a slow pace, and it was controlled. And he would eat, like oatmeal. He would just kind of eat, and then he would and he would speak. And he was always so articulate, and he'd always give me things to work on. And so we played a lot together. I remember we were doing a concert together, and there was one moment in the concert where I was like, you know what? I feel like it's kind of together now. Like I'm not embarrassed by what just happened. And And I remember, like I played a solo and I was, kind of stepping back because Vic was, walking more to the center of the stage to play. And as he walked past me, he said, "Nice try." And that was,
wow.
And that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, it's working. Because he would have never said that to me. Like
if it
wouldn't have been, like in the ballpark. And so, I remember like what he did, for my personal confidence was really awesome, because, a lot of us that play this music, we have to focus on our weaknesses so much that we become, kind of self-deprecating and sometimes, raise two hands for me on that one. And some of that's good. I mean, it's what like motivates you to get better.
Yeah.
But it also can be really damaging, and sometimes we take it a little too far. And I remember just like the positive things that he, said about my writing and, sometimes my arranging and just, the music I was playing. I just, it was like, man, it just gave me.
Goes a long way from someone you respect, doesn't it? Like
it's like that high praise from Caesar thing,
Yeah.
right? Where you're like, okay, if this guy's saying that it's okay, and he was kind of a no nonsense guy, but if he was saying like something was, was cool. I remember when I kind of got my first, record deals, and I was out playing, and I was getting some, a little bit, or some people were writing a little bit in the magazines, and just like the stuff that kind of can happen. I was kind of embarrassed by it because I could give you a list of 100 people I thought deserved it more, right? And I'd mentioned that to Vic, and Vic was like, "Don't talk like that."
We all feel like that, though, right?
But he was like, "Don't even go there." He's like, "Listen, man, you got these opportunities and things are going your way." He's like, "You
make the most of it."
Make the most of it. And he's like, "And you deserve to be here." I mean, he was just really understanding of like where I was in that phase of my career. And then at the same time, he would say things like, "Nice try."
Yeah.
he was just the best. I mean, Vic was like on every level. He was just incredible.
So you said you grew up in St. Louis, right? Yeah.
No, I actually grew up in northern Utah in like a very small farming community up in the mountains. Yeah, but I moved to St. Louis to do the Mel Bay, publishing gig.
Right. So they were based there, were they? And either of those scenes, was there a good, healthy jazz guitar thing, or were you doing?
Well, not in northern Utah. I mean, like
so, like
no. It was, and even back then, in like the, I mean, I was. I'm a 70s kid, so like I grew up in the 70s and 80s in like what would be probably considered fairly rural, northern Utah, even though the neighboring town had the university, Utah State University, which is where I teach now. So I'm like an old dog.
So you did full circle.
I went back home, which is there's a heck of a story there, but
I know it. That's how I ended up back here.
That's how you ended up back in New Zealand. Yeah, you've done the same thing. And so it wasn't great, but my dad's a professional guitar player, and he ran the guitar program at the university, and so I was always around him and his friends, that he played with, and so like at a very young age, I had people like turning me on to all the right recordings and all the right people to be listening to, and they let me play with them at a very young age. I mean, I started playing gigs at a really young age, and they weren't jazz gigs, but like
you're playing music, yeah.
I was playing music with professional musicians at a very young age.
And probably subconsciously you're absorbing that music too, would you say? Like if it's around you all the time, you're hearing those people, it's going in even though you don't realize it.
Yeah. I mean, my first gigs, like professional gigs, were with, we had a family band that, played like bluegrass music. But then like,
I heard you doing some country things before.
when I had your Martin out, yeah. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous. It's like, there's like three, I got like three moves. But but my first gigs were like playing Wyoming bars. Like in rural Wyoming, like Kemmerer, Wyoming.
And not old enough to get in, right?
Oh, not even close. I don't know how they pulled it off. I mean, they couldn't do it today, but back then, I guess they let some things slide. But yeah, Kemmerer, Wyoming, and Evanston, Wyoming. I mean, that's where I started playing. Those were long gigs, if I remember right. It's like you'd start at 9 and you'd end at 2. You know, it was like 5-set nights. And,
no better training though, right? Because you're learning on the job. And
it was
learning how to perform and how to play for people,
and just being and get a sound, and you know, and like you know, and actually, you know, our buddy Bruce Foreman would love this. It was like get a sound and fill a beat. You know, like we're just, you know, like Bruce's mantra, right? Like get a sound.
Bruce really was my mentor. Like your Vic Juris was my Bruce.
Was your Bruce? Yeah.
I remember Bruce saying to me once that you don't have to love your sound. You just have to like it.
You just have to like it.
And I remember going, okay, because you know, if you've got a bad tone, we'll be going like
struggling
with the room or whatever, and that same kind of thing. And you learn that from doing, don't you?
I've heard Bruce a million times say, you know, get a sound, fill a beat, make something happen.
Yeah.
And you know that's great. That's like kind of the best. Right? I mean, it's kind of the best advice. I mean, you know, he's so brilliant, you know, himself too. But like the way he boils things down, you know, into just like, okay, look, here's the basics.
He's a straight shooter.
And that's what I was, you know, that's what I was learning. But you know, I went to school in Florida, University of South Florida.
Oh, did you?
And I studied with Jack Peterson.
Okay.
Who was like, you know, like the infamous Jack Peterson.
Yeah.
And I mean, so Jack was an incredible mentor.
So is that why you went to Florida? Because he was there?
He was there, and that was the reason I was there. But then I got all of this other extra stuff. Like I got to study with this saxophonist, Jack Wilkins, who's an amazing player, but an incredible educator.
Like I was thinking of the guitar
player,
Wilkins.
And you know, and he's a friend of mine also. But Jack Wilkins, the tenor player, was really like a very important person, you know, in my development. And Chuck Owen, who's the big band writer that's, you know, like, in my opinion, one of the most important writers today, is the, you know, the founder, or one of the founding members, but I think he's kind of the founder of that Is Jack, you know, the International Society of Jazz Arrangers and Composers. Yeah, that's Chuck.
Right.
And so, and I've been in his band since, you know, 1999, I guess, or 2000.
So this is a bit full big band, did you?
Yeah, right. And now we just released a small group thing with me, you know, Chuck, Jack Wilkins, Sarah Caswell on violin, Kate McGarry singing, Danny Gottlieb on drums, and and Mark Neuenschwander on bass. And that's a fun band. But, you know, and it just kind of goes to show you, like, throughout your career, you make all these contacts, and sometimes it doesn't need to be in New York.
Yeah.
You know, it can be anywhere. There's important people everywhere, it seems like these days. But
and maybe lesser numbers of them, but still, everybody. If somebody has their little scene worked out in an area, that's
you're exactly right.
Like in Utah, it sounds like you've got a very good thing established with your uni job and your students and your gigs and all your stuff.
Yeah.
So you'd be the guy of the area, and that's really important to that area.
And it's kind of funny because, you know, I've lived there for 15 years and I'm kind of not the guy. There's actually a really great guitar player there who I think, you know, I would argue is probably like the guy. I still am doing a lot of stuff out of town. So, and you know how that is. Like when you're out of town, you don't get as many calls for in town, right? And so, you know, there's definitely, you know, regionally, there's people that are probably working harder than me, you know, in like the Salt Lake area. But I'm thankful for, you know, the gigs that I get, and I'm thankful that I can still go out and do this kind of stuff, and, you know, go on the road, whether it's, you know, with my band or just, you know, picking up musicians or with, you know, somebody else's band. I just, you know, I've got a nice balance. But
so the stint in Florida, did you did you get like a master's degree or an undergrad degree?
I got a master's degree, in jazz performance, and really it was it took me 2 years to do the degree, but it was the last 2 years that Jack Peterson taught as a university professor, and it was unbelievable. I mean, guy. I mean, you talk about arguably the most important jazz guitar educator. I think it might be him. I mean, his first job, he started the guitar program at Berklee School of Music. His first students were John Abercrombie, Mick Goodrick. You know, I think there was like 4 other guys. I think
he was the predecessor to William Levitt, right?
Bill Levitt. Yes,
that's right.
And then he left Boston and went back to Texas, and when he started the kind of the infamous guitar program at North Texas.
Right.
And so, you know, which then ended up being, you know, when he left, it was Fred Hamilton, who's, you know, a dear friend.
Recently retired, right?
Yeah, and Davey Mooney now is teaching there. And so there's an incredible legacy of players that came out of the North Texas program. So when you look at what Jack is like, offered, it's unbelievable. And his pedagogy
even with
was
3 degrees of separation, it's still like
it's unbelievable. I mean, Jack is just he's just been so incredible to the community, and his attitude of teaching was one that I kind of ended up adopting, because I love to teach. I love playing, but I love to teach also. And I remember in my first lesson with Jack, he heard me play, and he was like, oh, okay, now I kind of know what I'm dealing with here. Came back the next week, and he had a stack of music and handouts, some of which I ended up talking him into publishing later on through Mel Bay.
Right.
But I remember he sat it down on the music stand, and he goes, well, there it is. 40 years of me learning how to efficiently teach this music on the guitar.
It's all in that one place.
And he's like, and I'm going to show you all this in 2 semesters. But then he said something that was really, really cool. He said, and then your job is going to be to figure out how to make this better. And in 40 years, you teach it to somebody in 2 semesters. And that's how we're going to progress.
And assimilate all that information in a way that, what kind of that's an amazing insight, isn't it, into
unbelievable
how forward thinking he was. He wasn't even thinking about you. He was thinking about you plus the next step and the next step.
He was thinking about the whole thing, because he loved the music so much, and he was so good at teaching it that and to be honest, I still use some of his materials today. Because I have not been able to come up with anything better on my own. And here was the other thing that was great about Jack, is he'd be like, he'd show you something. He had all these funny sayings, he was, really old school in a lot of ways, but he had all these funny things that he'd say. But at the end of the lesson, he'd be like, yeah, that's it. He goes, that's the stuff. Now take that and go make some money. So he wasn't worried about anybody else like taking his stuff, and like making some money, or making it a profession. I mean, that was what he was doing. He's like, look, you're here for me to show you how to get better at this so you can make a living doing this.
That's amazing.
He just had an incredible, a truly incredible attitude about the whole thing of what it meant to be a teacher and to be a mentor. And then I ended up taking his job, because he retired, and so that school hired me to teach there for a year. But then I got the Mel Bay job, and that was kind of that was a no-brainer.
Dream job in many ways, isn't
it? Well, it was really crazy. So my dad had been doing some writing for Mel Bay. So when I was in grad school, my first year of grad school, I flew out. On the summer of that first year, I flew out to do some studio work for Mel Bay, and help my dad with a project. And I remember I was at lunch, and I remember where I was. We were at Steak and Shake in St. Louis, one of the Steak and Shakes. And I remember Bill Bay telling me, he said, I go to all these conventions, I go to all these guitar shows, and all these guys come up to me and they say, man, I got a great idea for a book. He said, like, everybody's got a great idea for a book. And he said, and I always think, okay, well, why would I publish that? But he said, sometimes somebody gives me a book that's already written and says, here's this book, it would work well in your catalog, And they said, then I have to say, why wouldn't I publish it? Because the work's
already done. Yeah.
Right? So, I'm not the smartest guy in the room usually, but I'm not the dumbest. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I think he just told me how to get published.
Yeah, it's to do the work.
I went back home. I had this like ancient, this would be 1998. I had this ancient laptop computer, but my wife at the time and we shared a vehicle, and she would drop me off at school when she would go to work, and it was like 5 a.m. Wow. And so my first class, it was at like 9 or 9:30. And so I had all this time, and I used to just practice. But I started devoting an hour a day to, like researching and writing. And after a whole semester, I ended up having a book published, or a book done. And I sent it to Bill and said, hey, this is done. I think it might fit in your catalog. And sure enough, he sent me a contract.
And you've had about 70 or 50 or
something
70
like
or
that.
Like that?
Yeah, it's crazy. So then he, so he passed off the
there we go.
2 more book contracts onto me that he had the idea for. And then after about a year, he called me and he said, I think I've got this job. I need somebody to be the senior editor for my company, and I think that you'd be good for it. And he's like, I've had a lot of people apply. I hadn't applied, but he said, I think it might be you. You know, take some time to think about it and you know, decide if you want to do it. But he said, I know that you're a player and you don't want to just like be behind a desk. So he said, you know, kind of make you a deal. You can go out on the road, you know, every other week or like 6 months out of the year, as long as you'll stay here and like bring me the best content back from your, you know, when you travel.
That's great.
And so he kind of funded all of my traveling for like 7.
And he recognized that was important to you to keep you on board to doing what you do. So that shows a lot of vision.
Bill
too,
Bay was like just an incredible person to work with. I mean, he just, and there's another guy, passion for the, you know, for the instrument and passion for progress. And he had a million great ideas. I mean, he had so many good ideas about like what needed or you know, what was needed in like the world of you know, publishing and books for guitar. And so I took the job, and then I got to travel, and I got to meet, you know, like so many of my heroes and help them publish their works, and I got to hang out with everybody. It was incredible. And one of my jobs was at the you know, at the publishing company was to do these recording sessions, and sometimes it was like the most basic guitar books needed a CD or whatever, so I'd go in and record the examples. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of stressful studio gigs, to be honest, because like there's no room for artistic interpretation. Like you are playing the ink.
Exactly.
And
what
it's not about creativity, it's about laying it down. But I used to hire really great people to do these sessions with me. Like there was a drummer named Joe Weber that I hired, a bass player named Jay Farmer, and another drummer named Emmanuel Harold, who's like Gregory Porter's drummer now.
Oh, right.
And
wow.
And if you know his brother Keon Harold, the like kind of famous trumpet player right now in New York, that's kind of got one foot in the jazz world, and then with, you know, it's kind of him and Robert Glasper do a lot of stuff together.
Right.
And so it's
yeah,
and it's the like the R&B, hip hop, rap, jazz. I mean, Keon's, you know, he's one of my heroes. You know, like Keon would do some sessions, like there were a couple we needed trumpet on, but like, wow. But I had this really great rhythm section, and so I was friends with the engineer, and we would do our sound checks, but I would tell him, record them and keep them. So he would record these sound checks, and like after about 6 months to a year, I had enough tracks to release an album, but just do it independently. And so I would, take it, and I was, I would just sell them on like my gigs, you know, like when I was on the road. And anyway, I gave a copy to Bill Bay, and I said, hey, Bill, you know, like full disclosure, you know, like these are my sound checks, you know, like, I mean, if you want
sometimes
me to,
it can be the best things though,
yeah,
right?
And I was like, if you want me to pay something for this or whatever, let me know. But, you know, I did technically do it on the company's time, but it didn't cost you anything. I mean, we had to be there anyway. Well, he took him home and listened to him. The next day, he called me into his office, and he goes, hey, man, come down. I want to talk to you about this CD. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I didn't think I was in big trouble, but maybe he was going to be like, you know, hey, you ought to give some money back to the company or something. And he goes, man, you know, the CD sounded really good, but he goes, it got me thinking, we should start a record label. And he said, and we should put like you as the first artist on the record label, and then we'll do everything right. And he said, the record labels, you know, this is 2002, they're dropping people right and left, and, you know, some really great artists are without a label. Like maybe we could pick up some guitar, and we'll just be focused. We'll just do like guitar, like, and jazz guitar to start. And he's like, well, this could be really fun, and we got the whole publishing company thing to back us up, you know. And so he explained it, and that's how Mel Bay Records started.
Wow.
And so
cool.
So if you ever saw like any of those records, like I was on the label, of course. Vic Juris was on the label. Bruce Saunders was on the label.
Oh yeah, yeah.
God, who else? Jimmy Bruno, I think, did have, you know, had something on the. Jonathan Kreisberg. I signed Jonathan Kreisberg to 2 records. So like that, what was that? South of Everywhere.
South of Everywhere. It's a great album.
That was an album that I signed Jonathan to that project, and it was really cool because, you know, I was out there playing, but I was also had this foot in the, you know, music corporate world, but I knew what time it was. I knew who the people were. And so there was a lot of integrity to all the projects that we were
Which is often something that doesn't happen, right? You have the guys that are in the corporate world that don't really get the playing
Don't
world,
get it.
But if you can kind of straddle the both of them, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's because of your academic background, but also you're playing since a young age, bars around the whole scene as a player as much as an educator, as well as a as well as like a businessman, if you will. And that whole thing. So
and it was. So we just had a heck of a time, you know. I mean,
Awesome.
it was just a ton of fun. We just had a lot of fun, you know. I mean, it was just great. And and then as life goes, you know, you have a really great job, and what's the logical thing to do? You know, like quit and then try something else. try something else. So that's how I got back kind of into academia, and I it was either move from St. Louis to New York or move somewhere else. And so we decided to move my family back to Utah, and which didn't make a lot of sense except for the fact that I could get to a plane, and it doesn't matter as long as you can get to a plane.
The world's global now, isn't it? Really,
right.
In a lot of ways, and living in New York is as much as that's a great experience. It's my favorite city in the world.
Yeah,
it's pretty hard with kids and family and all of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and and I've got a lot of other interests. I mean, like I fish quite a bit, and, and I'm kind of an outdoorsman. So like Utah, and that's what I grew up doing. So it was like a great place to live, and I've been there ever since. So.
Awesome.
Although
awesome.
I did teach at Indiana University for 5 years, and
they
flew me from Utah to Indiana to teach every other week. So
because I think Clay Jenkins is there too, right? Was
Clay,
he in Indiana?
No, Clay.
Oh, sorry, Steve Houghton.
Steve Houghton.
Because I played a tour with Steve when he was here, and I remember him saying to me, "We just appointed this guitar player." He goes, "Do you know Corey Christiansen?" And I'm like, I said, "I know of him. I never met him."
Yeah.
I remember Steve Houghton was raving about you.
And Steve was my, I used to crash at his house for the first 2 years I taught there.
Man, he's amazing. I remember.
Steve's the best. He's incredible.
We played one gig, and I remember he had monster ears.
Oh, he's amazing.
And I remember I played this thing, and I had a delay pedal on that timeline pedal.
Yeah.
And I played this thing where I went and that went with the delays, and he got a cymbal and he caught it.
Exactly.
And I was like, because I saw the recording, saw the video someone took of it from the audience, and I'm like, he was catching all my delay trails. I'm like, what drummer ever does that? Like,
he's unbelievable.
Just ridiculous.
He's incredible, and he also is an incredible educator. I mean, he's a great teacher.
Yeah, that rhythm section thing that those guys, him and I think Fred was playing guitar, and
Fred,
Shelley Berg. Might have been Tom Warrington playing bass.
It probably was.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And I remember that one was one that we used a lot with the students because it was really clear and it was right there,
Yeah, those guys, I mean, man, those guys are they were
heavy,
Yeah, very heavy.
Mm. Yeah. So what if one question we had from someone was about like ways to train your ear, and the person said they've got a good kind of sense of the ear.
Yeah.
They can hear harmony. They're good when they're playing, like they can hear what they want to do and what they do, but they said when they don't have their instrument, they said they really only have a pop level of understanding. Ear. I thought maybe
how to
like
get
interval
them to do
training
that?
or something like that. Do you have any advice?
I'm probably like the worst guy in the world to ask that question because I'm not sure I have very good ears. But
oh, come on.
But like what I've I guess what I've done over the years is I practice a lot in my vehicle, and it's mostly like with time stuff. Somebody asked me a while ago, they're like, what do you listen to, on the like when you're in the car, and I live in rural Utah still.
So you spend time in the car.
Yeah, so like everything's like, if I do a gig in Salt Lake, I mean, it's 90 minutes, there. But at the same time, I mean, if you lived in LA, if you went grocery shopping, it'd be 90 minutes, it's just, I'm covering 90 miles. And, but I just a lot of times I'll just put the metronome on, and then I just do rhythmic exercises while I'm driving.
So which ones in particular, like rhythm pyramids or something like that, or what?
Or I just sometimes I'll put them on and I'll just sing, or I'll put the metronome.
Excuse me.
Metronome on 1, 2, 3, 4. Put the metronome on 2 and 4. Put the metronome on 1 and 3. Put the metronome on the end of 1, the end of 3. Put the metronome on the end of 2 and the end of 4, and I'll just try and sing heads.
Right.
And after the heads, and I would never do this in front of anybody because
But you're in the car, so who cares?
Yeah, it's like singing in the shower. Except in the car, there's even less people that are going to hear it. But I would just so I would do that, and so there was a phase where I did that with like interval practice also in the car, where I would just like, I kind of like get a fixed do, and then just, I would just sing intervals. And it sounds ridiculous because like, everybody goes to music school. You hear people complain about their oral skills class probably more than any other class, right? Oh, this is such a drag. But it's like, no, that's like the best class. If it's taught well, it's like the best class. It's like it can be the most important class because you're learning how to develop your ear. And then, then you get into this thing where it's like, well, what are really chord progressions? Well, chord progressions, once you leave the one chord, everything technically kind of is just a substitution, right?
Yeah, and there's only 7 ways it can move, right? Stay in key, and then you start to realize that there's limited number of things.
Right, and there might be just like, there might really be like just 3. I mean, I remember Jack Peterson telling me, that like there's only, what did he say? There's only 3 intervals, and I'm trying to remember. It was like it's, like the one. What was it? No, there's only 4 intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, because everything else is an inversion of the.
Yeah, right. A fourth flipped is a fifth.
Is a fifth, and a third flipped is a sixth, and the second is is a seventh.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I never thought about that.
So he and that was part of the genius of Jack. Like he was always able to like, just like
distill it down to a.
Yes, to just like the most basic, things, and so So I used to practice, when I was driving a lot, just with like intervallic practice. But then once you understand chord substitutions, all of a sudden you're like, well, the 2 chord really is just kind of a 4 chord.
Yeah.
Right.
With a different brain.
And the 1 chord's really just kind of a 6 chord. And you start to think about these things, and then it's like, and to sidetrack, that's why I think there's like so many mistakes in what we call, like the real book, right? And so many people are like, oh, the real book sucks, the changes are wrong. I'm like, I don't know. Are they? Or was the person that was transcribing,
they didn't hear it as a 1, they heard it as a 6, and so they wrote it.
Right, or they heard it as like one of those things that could kind of, and I see that all the time on tunes. And it's like, God, just maybe, it happened in that moment. The bass player was playing this and the voicing was this, and it just got interpreted as something, something else. And so I never throw too much shade at the real book. I know I've actually, heard educators say like, you should burn your real books. I'm like, man, anytime burn and book happens in the same sentence, it's like, I don't think it's a great idea. I think I don't think it's something that you want to, rely on for the rest of your life in 100% of the time. But there's a lot of great information in
totally
in those.
And there's times when you need it. If someone calls a tune and they've started it and you've got no choice. The one I hate is iReal Pro that all the students use now, because there's no melody on there.
I know.
And I'd rather have the melody than have the chords. Do you know what I mean? Like to know. And,
I totally get it.
As long as it's not a clutch, you know what I mean? Because I find, I don't know if you've had this experience, but a lot of students don't dedicate enough time to learning tunes. And so they come into the jazz school and they'd start, when I used to teach there, and I'd say, right, how many tunes do you know? And they, heaps. And I go, okay. So we struggled to get through 5 that they knew from beginning to end.
Really well.
They didn't know the bridge, or they didn't know all the chord changes and stuff. Is that something you found a bit too?
Yes, yeah. And I kind of understand maybe the reason why. It's more and more the way, this kind of music thing goes. There's really less and less gigs, for a lot of players where you have to rely on knowing a lot of tunes that were socially relevant 60 years ago.
Yeah,
right.
I would agree with it.
And that's kind of a challenge, because I love all that music, but it's like to get somebody to subscribe to, hey, you need to learn, this music that's not like socially relevant anymore. It's very much musically relevant. It's not as much socially relevant.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And so, but it's so important because those tunes contain all the answers for, like what, like Black American music, right? I mean, like there's like all of that stuff is in there. It's somewhere. There's a lot of lessons to learn. You're either going to learn it with classical music, or it's going to be something to do with African American music, jazz, blues, and and some pop. But those answers are there.
Yeah, I agree.
And I did a workshop one time at this school, which will remain nameless, but the students said, hey, like maybe you could give us some insight to like how do you improvise and sound so melodic? Because when we play, it just sounds like scales. And I said, well,
it's because you're playing scales.
It's because you're playing scales, And I told them, I said, well, like, how many melodies do you know?
Yeah.
And they just kind of sat there and I said, play me a melody. And, of course, one of them played like, a Led Zeppelin riff or something. I said, no. Play a melody, like what the
song melody,
like what the words would go with. And we went around the entire room and nobody knew a melody except for one guy who knew the theme to Star Wars. And I was like,
wow.
And I'm like, well, that's a good one. It's a start. But I'm like, there's thousands of, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of melodies that you could be learning. And the more you understand the way melodies work, the more melodic you're going to play when you improvise.
And the better your improvising will be.
Yes. And so,
without a doubt.
And you'll learn how to build, an idea from a simple, motif or motive. I guess it depends on which school you went to. But those, those melodies are so important to learn, and then maybe that's why. And so, this it's not really a struggle for me because most of my students, for some reason, like where I teach, they're very respectful and they kind of trust me, because and maybe because I'm just straight up with them. I'm like, look, we're going to learn this tune. We're going to learn yesterday's,
But and that's the thing about being a player too, right? If you're just an educator or just a player, they'll struggle to get students' respect. I think if you show that you can do the thing that you're talking about, the students approach things very differently.
Changes the game completely.
Yeah.
But I'd be like, here's the melody. So I'm like, there's the same thing twice. Okay, so I'm like, what'd you learn there? That it's okay to repeat an idea.
Yeah,
right.
It's desirable.
And I'm like, if you know a bunch of melodies, then when you improvise, you're going to play melodic because you will understand the way, the tricks and the way that ideas develop, as they move through a composition. And you think of like the most melodic players. Like, I mean, when I say melodic players, the first guy that always comes to my mind is Pete Bernstein.
Yeah.
Right. And he knows like a bajillion tunes, right?
Every tune.
Yeah, he knows every tune.
I've yet to stumble on anything I've ever asked him for.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I know.
How do you know these?
I know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And and anytime you ask anybody, like, that's not a guitar player that hires guitar players, like from New York, like, who's your favorite guitar player? Oh, it's Pete. Like everybody says that. Well, why? Because Pete has a great time, he has a great sound, and he knows a million tunes, and he just plays melodic. And he makes everybody else sound great.
And it's crazy too, because a lot of what he does, I hear many other guitar players able to do the same thing on a technical level, but they don't do it like he does it. And that's the difference, isn't it? Because he just knows so much music.
I think that's got to be kind of what it is, like he just knows so much music. So I always use him as an example. I'm like, and and our mutual buddy Bruce Foreman, I mean, he plays so melodic too, and I don't think there's anybody that knows the bebop language on guitar better than Bruce. But it's because he knows a million solos. And he knows a million tunes, and and he's
and even if he doesn't know tunes, he can still. I've seen him play with singers.
I know.
He played one time with a singer, and he said to her, "What do you want to do?" And she called some tune, and he goes, "I think I know it." He goes, "Sing me a note." So she sang a note, and he goes, "Okay, we're in that key." And it was so random. It was some tune that nobody ever plays, and nobody ever.
And he got through it fine.
And he got through it, and now it's like I just went away going. Monster ears. That's
and to come full circle. I mean, that was the original question, which I almost did an artful job, of like dodging.
No, I like your answer.
But it just comes down to like just getting in the game and like like practicing, but just practicing also with a focus. If your ear's weak, like how much the question would be like, well, how much time do you spend a day or a week? Focusing on like hearing those things or not just passively listening and saying, man, that's cool. But like going back and be like, no, that was cool. But what is that? I mean, I find myself even today, like stuff that my son listens to or whatever, like they'll play me something. I'm like, oh, I kind of want to know what that, like what that is. I mean, there was and all kinds of different styles of music. Like I was listening to, what's her name? Is it Madison Cunningham?
Oh, she's great.
She's great, right? I mean, it was amazing. She had that, some riff that she's got that she played. You know the tune I'm talking about? And it was like, I had to know. I'm like, what is she doing there? Like, it sounds so good. It's down an octave, and I'm like, and then I'm like, how's she getting that sound? Like, is that a baritone guitar?
And
or
singing while playing.
And
shit too.
singing while playing, which I'm not even going to, attempt to do that. But I'm like, man, I kind of want to know what that is, because then I know what it feels like on the guitar. And then when I hear it again, I go, oh, I know what
it's already in your...
If I know what it feels like, then I can recreate it. And the thing is, we've all done it because we can speak with each other. Right? So we don't think about what our mouth does when we're speaking. We just know it's like, look, we've logged all of these sounds, and they're at our, they're kind of at our disposal. And then when we have a thought, or we hear somebody else, we know what that is, and we can recreate it. Well, that is the same.
And you learnt it by immersion, didn't you? You were your parents around you. They didn't, from day one, they were talking to you, and in the language you had to know. And so that's kind of a thing. So I have a question too about you're here to play with Clay and Matt.
Yep, Clay Jenkins and Matt Harris.
You've played with Clay Jenkins
before?
Yeah.
Have
you played with Matt before?
I've never played with Matt before.
Oh.
So I'm really looking forward to, to hanging out and, and making some music with him. But yeah, Clay and I we've played a lot of gigs together over the years. I mean, he's also in Chuck Owen's band. So like anytime I'm doing the Chuck Owen thing, I've been playing with Clay. And then we've been at a lot of, festivals together and educator performance things. So yeah, I've known Clay. The
thing I remember played a tour with Clay, and I remember one thing that he taught me was about space that I've never heard anybody else do it. He would do this build and build and build and build, and just when it's going to hit that high point, he would stop and wait for 4 bars, and the band's cooking, and then he would go,
what?
Bang, there it is. And I remember that delayed anticipation thing was just so powerful, and I went away from that going, okay, I gotta kind of, use space more effectively, because he really is a master improviser in so many ways, and hell of a nice guy too.
Yes, for sure.
So you guys are playing Palmerston North, I believe, and then you're playing the Rogan Vagabond in Welland.
Yep, Rogan Vagabond, yeah.
And then you're doing some workshops around. I think you're doing something with Kevin Downing in Palmerston North, his guitar.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really looking.
You're doing small group and big band too, aren't you? Doing something with Roger?
I think there's a couple. Yep, with the Roger Fox big band, and then but small group stuff also.
Yeah, great. Oh man, that's awesome. Great. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time, and thanks for coming in and doing this for the.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, there'll be 10 of you watching, I'm sure.
Tens of you.
Tens of you. No, thanks, Corey.
Appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks.